In a world of red dots, LPVOs, and good old-fashioned iron sights, in what situation, other than having an astigmatism, would you rather have a prism sight? When Primary Arms gave us the chance to run their new GLX 1X Prism, we decided rather than just giving you the specs and some footage, we would try to answer the question. Here are our findings on why you might want to run a prism scope.
Do you like seeing the boogeyman hanging out with cryptids rolling dice in your front yard? I know I do. If you want to see all the crazy things happening right outside your house, check out TNVC.com.
And by Vortex. We've been running their new Defender line of red dots hard since before launch. They found a home on all of our guns, whether for concealment, competition, or anything in between. They're rugged, packed with features, and they flat out perform. With the CCW, ST, and XL, there's a dot for you. And let's not forget their no questions asked VIP warranty that covers just about anything.
First of all, what is a prism scope? It's implied in the name that prisms are closer to a scope than the 1 power would lead you to believe. Though, like in this GLX 1X, where they've gotten as close to true 1 power as you could possibly get in a scope, the optic does bounce light around between multiple lenses to accomplish getting the image that gets to your eye. This design choice is important for a few reasons. Scopes have and still utilize etched reticles in their glass to give a reliable and precise way to give a point of reference for aiming. Prism sights give you that option. The GLX 1X Microprism has continued Primary Arms' love affair with the ACSS Cyclops reticle. This, both being etched and illuminated, allows you to have a reticle in nearly every lighting condition and shooting position possible. With a traditional red dot, you typically have the issue of being plenty bright for outdoor use, but you end up having to adjust it when you get into a darker environment. Or vice versa, if it's a good brightness level for darker conditions, it's not bright enough when you go back into full sun or when a weapon-mounted light is turned on. The GLX reticle can be set bright enough for indoor use, and even if it gets overpowered by light, you'll just have a nice black reticle, which is utilized without messing with any buttons. Plus, unlike LPVOs, your battery life will be more than 5 minutes, and you can leave it on and forget about it. The GLX gives you a range of 25 to 50,000 hours of battery life, depending on the brightness level. It accomplishes this with their Auto Live feature, which is their version of motion activation and utilizing the tried and true CR2032 battery. The second unique trait ascribed to the 1X Prism is its infinite eye relief it offers. I can hear the red dot users now, I being amongst the short-sighted, who are saying, well, my red dot has infinite eye relief. My response to that is at what cost? Outside of how bad emitters look and stand out in the dark, especially when night vision comes into play, one of the things that makes optics a liability is the glare that comes off the glass when hitting any kind of light. No amount of rattle canning your gun is going to make the front lens of your optic any less reflective. Scopes have used anti-reflective devices, or ARDs, in the form of lens shades or kill flashes for years, and get away with this due to the way that they collect light and aim that back towards the shooter's eye. When you try this with standard red dots, you end up feeling like you're looking through a mesh fence. Conversely, with LPVO scopes, the magnified optics, you tend to have poor eye boxes, and your sight picture is anywhere from a near acceptable, hey Cog, I'm looking at you, from very close, but the ARD is practically invisible when mounted to scopes. Being that this is a long gun optic, the etched reticle again comes in clutch, offering ranging and holdovers within the ACSS Cyclops, which are seemingly impossible to provide in a red dot, of which can be amplified in usefulness if a magnifier is paired with the GLX 1X, for those of you that partake in those types of setups. All of this utility comes at a staggering $299 as of the filming of this episode, which is ridiculously competitive. The biggest surprise we experienced with the GLX 1X was how usable it was with night vision, even with the reticle off. As a quick disclaimer, we were using TNVC provided super gain tubes, so our superpower is better than most. But if you get the adjustments between the diopter and the optic and your nods, and you're looking at a surface that's a bit brighter than the reticle, you can use the etched reticle to aim your rifle without emitting any light from your optic or a lamp. This could be used as a huge force multiplier if you're dealing with a near peer or a night vision equipped deer. The effect is more dramatic when experienced not through a phone recording through a PVS-14, but it can be done, and that is a unique property of the Prism. You can also use it more traditionally with the illumination on, and it performs about as well as a cheaper red dot would in similar circumstances.
So we've just got back from shooting at the ever so generous Mr. Guns range out there in Plano. I want to thank Josh and Gret from over there. They're pretty good dudes. A much cooler Josh than me. But as part of that, we wanted to give like a good exercise and demonstration of what you can get out of Prism sights, and then have them right next to magnified optics, and then obviously red dots, which are the other options that you have. Yeah. We both pulled out our binos. I don't own, I'm poor, but I do get access to them while they're here. But it was cool. I think this actually surprised me a lot.
It was different. I don't really have any experience other than like ACOGs of prisms, and granted, those are magnified. I've been aware of 1X prisms, and I've seen people run them, but I've always just had the question of like, why?
Yeah.
Because red dots exist, and
they're cheap for that matter.
Yeah, and a red dot has been, what I typically just default to on if it's not like a super long gun I'm taking precision shots with, it gets a red dot and then maybe a magnifier. Getting to mess with these, especially when we started like messing with them under nods and utilizing like ARDs, I kind of started to see, especially with the ARDs, I'm not looking through like a chain link fence to see my target,
Yeah.
But the clarity as well, they're very clear, and like they get pretty decent light transmission.
We are in with, and this is kind of a beautiful setup that we have it here, but it's on a carry handle with the ARD on in an indoor range that's pretty dark. Like it's darker than it would normally be.
This thing looks pretty good on here.
Outside, it does look sexy.
Also, I'm of the full opinion you do not need a high rise
no,
mount.
Just get a carry handle.
This is perfect.
But it was ironically rather comfortable under night vision, where you're aiming passively, basically through the optic. The lowest brightness setting, at least on the GLX 1X, was a little bright.
It's still usable, though.
It was perfectly usable, but what was cool is how clear it was. And we were like probably 20 minutes into filming, and I was like, oh my God, the ARD's been on this whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, whoa.
And for those of you who don't know, ARDs, while they are designed mainly to like kill flash, and that's ARD stands for anti-reflection device.
Yeah.
But the caveat is, especially if you're using it with a red dot, you're looking through an ARD, so it looks, like you're looking through a chain link fence or some kind of mesh. But I've noticed this on my personal gun because I run red dots on all of my personal guns.
Yep.
But if you use a magnifier, that kind of goes away. You still get a little bit of artifacting because there's still a little bit there, but you can ignore it. But with this, I didn't really see a whole lot of it at all. And like you said, we were shooting for quite a while, and we're like, wait a minute. I want to see what this looks like without this.
Yeah.
And it got a little brighter, but I mean, it was comparable. When you're using nods, you can kind of get away with, low light transmission if you have ambient light, like if there's a moon out and stuff like that. But I think in a real dark scenario, you might want to have that ARD out. Like if you're pitch black, no moon out in the woods, especially under like a canopy, you would probably want to have that out. But the coolest part about this was actually when it was off.
Yep.
We were experimenting with this out at the outdoor range, and we were kind of like, hey, it's an etched reticle.
Yeah.
That's one of the big benefits about a prism is if your battery dies, EMP goes off, it gets knocked around, something inside of it breaks, and you don't have illumination. You have a etched reticle that it's still there. Mm-hmm. If you don't have power, it will still work. Granted, completely usable in certain scenarios. If you're in a dark area, like I said, or like in the woods under a canopy, it's a black reticle on a black background.
Yeah.
You're going to have a hard time. But if there's any kind of like contrast in your sight picture, it's usable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I still think for that specific use case where you're trying to aim passively, red dots, especially if you get like the more expensive red dots that have specific night vision settings, and you can look at the EOTechs and all that stuff that are kind of designed for that use case, still likely better solutions. However, they don't give you the benefit of the etched reticle. They cost a lot more than especially like the GLX 1X. Yeah,
I love EOTechs because they have amazing light transmission. If you don't know how they work, like there is a little sorcerer in there bouncing lights around to give you your reticle.
Yeah,
it's really crazy. They don't need a reflective lens. However, the battery life on an EOTech is not the greatest.
I think it's a compelling argument for people that are getting into it. If you barely afforded the PVS-14, and you barely afforded the helmet.
Yeah.
This is helping your budget a lot for something that's still very usable in the day,
100%.
but has a very cool side effect or use case, especially when you look at like duty use. Like I come from that world where we went with 8 points. literally specifically for battery life. And we had guys that would still run night vision. I was not that cool. But guys that got night vision also ran these aim points. One, for the usability, they had better settings in the bottom end. But this has still had to be a duty rifle during the day, and then had to be this like very precise thing under nods at night. And that flexibility was nice. But if I ever, and it was pretty much never, but if I ever had to run into somebody with nods, having that option, especially in an urban environment where there's gonna be variation in lighting, you're gonna have stuff like concrete, you're going to have like city lights and stuff like that. Being able to just kill all of that and hide in a bush and like not emit any light. Being able to still actively aim without emitting anything is very, very cool.
Passively.
Yeah, passively. But I do think that that's a pretty compelling argument, especially we get guys that just are poor maintenance. I know you Glock guys are out there that you don't maintain anything. They're not cycling batteries. They're not doing whatever.
And there's a lot of people out there who like, lean more towards the ACOG because it uses fiber optic, and it also has an etched reticle. So in the event that like it doesn't need batteries. A lot of them don't. There are some that do. But that's the cool thing about this is that it doesn't need batteries. If it dies, you still have a reticle that's zeroed that you can still use.
Kind of going over to daytime use, and this is probably more realistic for everybody else that's here. As cool as it is under nods, and it was just a fascinating experience. I haven't seen anyone really try this, at least not in my searches of the internet. Daytime use for 1X prisms specifically kind of crushed. But in the 1X, you get so many more of those benefits that you would get with a red dot in that it's a lot quicker than something that's magnified. You have like your basically infinite eye relief. It's not as forgiving as a red dot as far as like cheek weld, but it is way better, like miles better than a magnified optic.
One of the big contrasts we saw between the red dot and the prism was specifically with ARDs. We were aiming not necessarily into the sun, but like kind of adjacent towards the sun. It just blows out your sight and you can't see anything.
Yeah.
Whereas on the prism, it'll still do it. But since you have since the light is bouncing around these prisms, it's similar like a camera. You can kind of see past it.
Yep.
It's still bright, but it's still usable. Whereas if you're proned out with a red dot and you're trying to aim, you can't see anything.
I think it kind of crushes there. I think a lot of you guys that are doing this for like home defense or in a lot of like, personal use case or defensive use cases for a firearm, you don't get to pick oftentimes where that fight's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so like these are designed kind of implicitly to do well in whatever those circumstances are. I think the biggest thing is using a white light. If most of these things happen at dark, most of these home invasions, whatever it is, or you're a cool guy, super trooper, and you're going through a window or something like that, just like you would with the sun, with a white light, it's the same issue where my white light, especially for a rifle, I'm wanting one that can reach out to 150 yards. Well, dude, at 10, it's terrible. Or if a light's being used back at you, for you guys that played Battlefield back in the day, when somebody hits you with a white light and now you're blind, technically I would still be able to use my reticles, see it, and use it, and just go attack the light at that point.
If you have bad eyes, these are built for you, dude.
Yeah.
The ability to actually dial this into your eye and get like a really sharp image, even if you do have some eye problems, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think red dots are still probably the cheapest way to get something reliable. Zero Tech was probably the most competitively priced. I was actually really impressed. The reticles in general can be cheap. That's kind of what's great about reticles when they're etched like that. It's like, it's just a cut piece of glass. We've been doing that for eons. We're very good at manufacturing those. It's just a matter of whether or not you can get a good sight picture on them. I was actually really impressed. We have a bunch of footage of this in the exact same circumstances we put the GLX 1X in, and they're close. There is some optical clarity. I think the glass is a little bit cleaner on the GLX 1X, and then the brightness settings there's more variation. I think within this goes from like almost too dim to like too bright or really, really bright. The other thing I will say is I do prefer the ACSS over the reticle that's on this. This will work for some people, but the diopter's the same, the ability to use all of the properties that make this cool, and they're all relatively competitively priced. This type of technology will likely start to trickle out towards people that are using these guns every day or have a very serious use case for the guns where it's not just going to be shooting at a bench rest or shooting at whatever. These are also a lot cheaper than LPVOs, where to get a good one, you're spending a lot of money and you're going to start getting crushed in situations where now your eye box is less friendly. Now your battery life's going to start to suck, and now you're losing all of those properties that you got with this.
It's also a lot heavier.
Yes, too. So
it does not look as good on the carry handle as a one-power GLX does. That thing kind of
For the magnifier running boys, you guys are probably going to like this news. I think you guys should try Prisms. I think if you guys haven't had any time behind them, you totally should. If you have any other questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them in the comment section below. Or if you'd like to get really in the nitty gritty and say things the internet likely won't let you, you can go join us in the forums. If you don't know who we are, just figure it out. It starts with what this thing is called and ends with a .com. But everywhere else, you can find us on socials at ARFCOM and the places where we're not allowed to say our names. And then if you really want to have an unhinged discussion, you can go join us in the Discord. We have a public Discord. It should be linked in the doobly-doo below. If you guys like the stuff, go ahead and interact with it. Tell us what you guys want to see, and we will get it to you next time.